Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. Alex Truesdell is the founding executive director of the Adaptive Design Association, a small not-for-profit organization that promotes the design and creation of customized equipment for children with disabilities. Her training as an educator belies her talent as an engineer and her heart and commitment to the futures of these children. So you were trained as a teacher.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And hello, first of all.
Hi, thank you.
You're trained as a teacher for visually impaired or just as for physically disabled?
My undergraduate work is in special ed, and then my graduate degree is in teaching the visually impaired.
So how did you get into what you're doing now?
I had just graduated in 1981 and started working with infants at the Perkins School for the Blind, which is in the Boston area. And in 1981, my aunt had a spinal cord injury, right at the time that I was learning that the infants on my caseload had a variety of disabilities that couldn't really be, environmentally couldn't be responded to with materials that are purchased through a store.
So this is an infant that's visual.
Yeah.
How do they even know when an infant is visually impaired?
Sometimes it's easy diagnosis to detect at birth. But as the weeks and months go by, if the child isn't developing typically, then there are people, or the physicians often will say, we've got to get some specialist in here to help this child develop on age level. So while I was realizing that just the vision impairments that I had studied were just one piece of a puzzle, I was realizing that the environment needed to be modified. So if a child couldn't crawl to playthings, the playthings had to be brought to them.
So when you talk about an infant, it's not necessarily a week-old baby. These are children
Anywhere,
as they
say,
get
birth to age 3.
Okay.
So within that time, someone has picked up.
I'm a grandmother, and a 3-year-old is an old person to me, so that's why it's a little misleading. So it's a year, so from birth to 3. So you see the child really developing. They're growing.
Yes.
They're moving around.
Right.
And then, so when you talk about the environment, you mean the equipment they have or the things they want to do, they can't do.
Right, right. I actually brought something to help us explain a little bit.
All right. You want to show us now? Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. So what did you do? When your aunt had the spinal cord
The spinal
injury.
cord was kind of an unusual one because it actually resulted, it was a medical examination, and it resulted in paralyzing her hands, so that within just a flash her hands were completely paralyzed. And that led to needing to adapt her entire world, from how she was going to brush her teeth, to drinking a cup of coffee, to getting into the refrigerator, to leaving the house. And fortunately, my uncle was brilliant at being able to adapt anything. And I've been thinking before talking to you about what was the moment where I thought this whole concept of adaptive design was so powerful. My uncle was actually preparing a meal, and my aunt wanted to turn the fan on over the stove. So she was reaching up, trying to deal with these little round knobs, and couldn't rotate them. And my uncle actually took the knobs off the hood of the stove, took them to the basement, and drilled through them and screwed a bolt through the knob, and then set them back up, meaning that when she reached up, she could actually catch a little piece of a finger over this extension and turn them on. And that this moment of, wow, we don't have to accept things as they are, we can adapt them. And as I talked to him about the children on my caseload, he said we could make activity centers that bring the toys and hang them in front of, and contour chairs, and make things, adapt their environment so that they succeed in doing whatever it is that their job as children is to play.
So that's what we call adaptive design. It's taking an ordinary thing and making it adaptable for your needs. That's simply that.
Yeah. So for my aunt, in holding a toothbrush, that little handle would be so small, but her dental hygienist said, well, why don't we put a tennis ball on there? So just by cutting slits in the tennis ball, it would slide up you could insert the...
So important, as my mother, we talked about this before, but my mother was 95, and couldn't do many things, and I would go to look for some entertainment for. I found myself in children's departments looking at children's toys. But just all of these different things that we need that are adaptive. So what did you do? So at Perkins, it really took off.
Right. For some time, I would propose a challenge, and my uncle would make whatever he'd make the adaptation. And at some point, he said, "You've got to learn to do this. You've got to learn to use a drill and a jigsaw, and you can glue things and bolt things, and just learn the names." And that was tremendously liberating. And as I learned to do it, I would teach fellow teachers and occupational and physical therapists to do what he was teaching me, and then realized that actually people had lots of ideas. There were frustrations that they had just been coping with because there wasn't a place to go to have something made. That my scenario of learning that things could be adapted from my uncle was something that needed to happen for everybody. And so Perkins, at some point in the mid-'80s, agreed that maybe there was a need. And so in '87, a small workshop was established. We called it the Assistive Device Center, and it continues to this very day. So 18 years later. And so that is a center where people come. There are volunteer senior citizens who are retired from engineering and carpentry and upholstery, and they're able to fabricate the things that the teachers and therapists think of.
So after that, though, when I first heard about you and your work, you had won a fellowship from the Kellogg Foundation and another group. Right. And you traveled to South America and to India?
Yes.
Teaching people how to make this equipment? So it showed another side of the value of this adaptive equipment, didn't it? Because you make equipment out of materials that are more readily accessible and certainly more economical.
Right.
So tell us about that.
One of the most available material is corrugated cardboard, and so that is something that's available pretty much worldwide. We use in the United States something called tri-wall, which is 3 layers of corrugated cardboard. Right now, if you go to buy some watermelons, you may see watermelons in tri-wall boxes at the produce market. If you don't have that, you can layer them. So in the early 90s, the Partners of the Americas, all the U.S. states, are partnered with states in Latin America. And at that time, Massachusetts is partnered with Antioquia, Colombia. And a teacher from Antioquia had studied at Perkins, and she contacted the Partners of the Americas and said, "This is very important in Medellin." So I went there and worked with her school and university.
Keep talking. I'm sorry, just ignore me.
And there really realized the same phenomenon, that people have lots of ideas but aren't trained to use tools and materials. So the ideas die on the vine, so to speak. But when people learn that you can sew something or drill something or glue something or bend a piece of cardboard, then the ideas can actually come to life.
Did I hear that you made a wheelchair out of paper mache? The body, maybe?
It can be done by layering cardboard, and I haven't done the chair that we made that week, actually, in the early 90s was on small casters. So it wasn't the wheelchair that we would typily think of with the large wheels.
But it served a purpose.
Oh, absolutely. So it was a
What
scooter
did you find when you went in South America? The available equipment? I mean, did you have to improvise even further while you're improvising the original edition?
Yeah, there isn't as much here. As the years have gone on, I would say, since I first kind of stumbled into this through in the early 80s, there are now a lot more vendors who make fabulous items. However, still, people have very unique needs. In and it's the law in the United States that we should make accommodations, and that whatever a child or a person with disability needs, we should be making
the Disability Act, right?
But that's not the law in Latin America or in other parts of the world, so that there are even fewer vendors of adaptive equipment.
Oh, I see. So it's even more difficult than to convince people to do it too, I guess, because they're not used to it.
Well, the easier part is that people are very happy to work together and be resourceful and not wasteful, which I'm sorry to say is kind of common here, that if something is a little off, we toss it. or we're more helpless. We just hope somebody else will come along and fix
We
it.
think we can go to the store and buy something else. Yeah.
And if it's not there, we do without it. And so we've become so dependent on other specialists that we really have forgotten how to make things. Where in the Latin American countries and in Poland and in India, I didn't find that. I found that people were very interested in solving the problems and very resourceful and very eager to invite people in. You know, that there wasn't much turf. There was, oh, let's think together and let's get the janitor and the guy at the plastics factory and, you know, let's invite the teacher at the technical high school to come.
So the collective thinking is really what you relish, to solve the
Utterly
problem.
essential. That, and because none of us can do it alone, we need each other. And so that whole issue of somebody needs to have the idea, somebody needs to get inspired. And actually, I brought a couple of pictures. This first one I could talk about is a little guy named Kevin who has, he's a little person. So he is in a combined kindergarten, first and second grade. But because he's tiny, he was sitting on his feet and kind of always disadvantaged from his much taller classmates.
So he wouldn't be able to sit at the table, be at the same level, or
no. And because he was so much smaller, he was treated as much younger, which wasn't true. And so his physical and occupational therapist said that wouldn't it be nice to have a chair that brought him up to eye level? And would it be possible to make that out of cardboard? And, you know, it might tip if it's not weighted, and it'll need to step up because he's got to climb up, to sit down, to put his feet. So it's very doable, but it did in fact require that team think.
Well, let's come to New York, because we've skipped how you got here and what Adaptive Design Association is. It's a small organization.
It is tiny.
But for its size, it's growing in its field of work and its influence, right?
Right.
So you've come because you believe in this collectiveness. Not only can you make the equipment, but you need to have the need for the equipment, right? So you need then what? You need teachers, or you need the social workers, or the physical therapists,
parents,
all the parents. You need all of these people to make this process work.
Yes.
And you run workshops then? Mm-hmm. So do you answer individuals for their needs?
We do, yeah. If someone
if a parent calls you
absolutely.
And finds out about you and wants to talk to you, you will then take the lead in talking to that child's, if it's for children, in talking to that child's physical therapist and whatever else is in the environment.
Right, right.
But you will also go to places to train. So tell me about what you do. What does Adaptive Design Association do?
Our mission is to make sure that children get the adaptations they need to participate fully, because that isn't actually happening. And we want to work with whoever notices that child could do more. And so a parent may call, a therapist may contact us. In order to increase demand, we offer classes, Introduction to Adaptive Design, and we teach cardboard carpentry. And through that, people start to realize how much is possible. So the hope is, by nurturing creativity on the part of anyone on the team, anyone within that child's circle of supports, we then generate more and more ideas. What should happen, and what did happen at the Perkins School for the Blind, even in the other countries, is that the technical design actually will exceed the capacity of the teachers and the therapists and the parents. So then we need to invite in people who are skilled in working with metals or wood or electronics, so that more elaborate solutions can be designed, and that people feel really good about dreaming up, how to motorize a rocking chair.
So is this concept of adaptive design, is that not part of the curriculum of schools that prepare the people who are working in this field?
No, it's not.
So that's one of the important missions also.
Right, to get to the universities, so that teachers, therapists who are in coursework, undergrad or grad, absolutely know that you will run into situations every day when you're not able to find a solution in your catalog.
Is there a potential for the mass production of these things at different stages in life, or is it a refinement of existing things? I mean, I have a booster chair for some of the grandchildren.
Right.
But that's a standardized thing.
That's standardized, so that's still hoping that that child has head control, is able to have strong trunk muscles, you know, that if the footrest doesn't reach, that they don't mind having their feet dangle.
Yeah.
But each of those adaptations, then, that customization is very expensive, so it's not attractive to the mass market. So, which is why all of the people with more multiple disabilities will fall right through, and it will be considered their problem rather than, well, let's make an adaptation and make the chair work for him, rather than seeing, well, he's just too small for the classroom
And the kind of
furniture.
materials you use are really economical, so that more people can afford them.
Right.
So who came to you with Kevin? How did you find Kevin?
His team, his physical and occupational therapist, had realized that he really could benefit from this adaptation, and they came to class and made it through class.
Right. Now, who else do you have to show us?
This is a story of Carlos, and his physical therapist came to class one day and said, a few hours into class, you know, I have this kid, and he's always in his wheelchair, which is true. So many kids are in wheelchairs, and they're stuck in there all day, every day.
Yeah.
And she said, I'm sure that if he has the upper body strength, and if he could have a set of steps so that he could transfer out of the seat onto the floor, he could be with his classmates during circle time. So in fact, he has the upper body strength, and he could slip out of the seat onto the top step and to the second step and down to the floor level.
Now, you brought a chair with us. Let's see the chair. And who was that for?
This is for an 8-month-old, and he was born preterm. So he has a twin, and the twin is just getting around fine, but he actually needs to have some supports for sitting up. So it has the removable headrest, which eventually, maybe within even a few weeks, he won't need that. But for now, the headrest is there. This actually will be finished within a couple of days. We'll put a little strap for him to hold him in, and then it has a little play table. And I actually brought a little toy here so that you could get a sense of
the size of
once he's, because he's very tiny. I'm guessing he weighs probably about 14 pounds, just very little guy. But even during the fittings, because he had enough support here, you know, that he was cued not to keep falling over to bring him back. But this is not commercially available.
And now, how much would something like this cost to produce?
It's about $300. Now, there is some time in the fittings and all, but the material, the cardboard itself, this cardboard is only about, I don't know, maybe $10 in materials.
So the rest is the time and the amount it takes.
Right. And there's a lot of skill involved, and I think that, you know, when people think cardboard, well, but it really is a type of engineering.
And it's very tough.
Yeah, actually we've made chairs, as you can see, for kids that are much bigger. The tri-wall itself will actually hold 1,100 pounds. So we can make it we can reinforce it with wooden nails, and there's hot glue, and so we can make it.
How do you get the money to do this? Other than your commitment and doing it for nothing, because you have to support yourself, right?
Right. Well,
and the people who work there.
Yeah, we raise funds through, I hope I haven't dislodged something. We charge a fee for the class, and there is for kids who are in the school system, there's a reimbursement for equipment that's put on their education plan.
Oh, so the school system reimburses, or it's an insurance?
They should. So because with the
special education.
Yeah, it's
funds.
Part of the law that if somebody notes it, like the transfer steps, if somebody sees that that's something he needs to have a full and fair education, he should have that, and
so
it should
these
be
are
paid.
things that really could be available to everybody because the public funds are there to pay for them. It's just that you have to get that message to the people who could start this process.
Yes, and to assure them that in fact there will be much less waste. I think that the system is worried about expensive equipment that isn't used, and that has happened a lot, that people want to fix a problem, order something from a catalog, and it really doesn't work, or it needs to be modified, and again, there isn't enough time or resources to do that.
There's nobody there with the ability to modify it.
Right.
So do you think that when you do this, like this little table or Kevin's seat, Kevin will outgrow it? Will it be adaptable for somebody else?
It may be. And again, that's why we would want the word out, so that it may come back and get...
you can recycle it and somebody else can use it, and you can adapt it to that person's individual needs. So you get money from how? Foundations? Foundations
primarily. And we have some city money, a little bit of state money. We don't have enough individual donors, and we don't have any corporate sponsors at this moment. And because we're a staff of 5, 2 are part-time, 3 of us are full-time, it's a lot of hats everyone wears from...
Well, you're busy going out trying to spread the word.
Right, right.
In addition then to complying with the stuff.
Yeah.
So what have you found, the curriculum people, what's the response to making this an official part of curriculum? How do you have to do that?
So that teachers and therapists are prepared to do it.
Right.
Well, it's finding professors at universities, and we do at Columbia and NYU, some colleges in Maine and Quinnipiac in Connecticut. There are professors that absolutely say this is essential. And those actually are all training physical and occupational therapists. It's not, some people don't value what it means anymore to build with your hands, that it's thought that other people ought to do that, but it's so essential, and that people who come to class are frustrated. They said, I should have been doing this all along. And so there are a few professors that are willing to bring it back, but the way the curriculums are so packed, it's hard to get it in there.
So once you teach somebody how to use it, it means that they either have to set up their own workshop, or can they come and use your workshop at any time?
They can, yeah, they continue. We have a lot of people who have continued to come. Right. That of the plus or minus 4,000 therapists in the Department of Ed, about 400 have been to adaptive design, and of that, another 30 have come repeatedly, and of that, about 10 have come over the last 3 years and are setting up projects in their schools and learning to teaching others to assess children and convincing their principals that this is important and doable, and some principals are releasing them a bit to help other professionals.
The more we try to mainstream, is that what we're talking about with children with disabilities, does that somehow work against their getting the kind of special attention that you want to give to them? It shouldn't.
It shouldn't. It shouldn't, especially with those 2 children that they...
And your equipment is really what, I mean, by mainstreaming it, you're providing the equipment to really make that a meaningful experience, so that they can really, what's the point of putting a child into a classroom when he can't participate in some of the activities, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And simple things like, wouldn't it be nice for a child in a wheelchair not to be sitting at the wheelchair while everyone else is sitting at the cafeteria table or on the floor?
Yeah.
And
what other pictures? Who else do you have?
This is actually, these are our younger children. This is a baby she lived only for about 9 months. And well, at 6 months she was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, which meant that her muscles were deteriorating, and it was increasingly painful for her to be held. And in her soft stroller that was saggy, that was painful. So we were asked to design with the physical and occupational therapist a holder, a baby holder, so that she would be in that and comfortable, and she could be snuggled but not crushed, which was what was so painful. This is a little girl named Hannah who's had actually many pieces of equipment in her 3 years. This is on wheels, and so this a scooter, and she can travel around her house.
So this is similar in a way to the chair that you showed us before,
actually,
except that it's got wheels.
Right, it actually was
inspired
a steering
wheel.
By that. Yeah, it was just, imagine cutting the front off, raising it up, and putting it on wheels, which gave her mobility.
Yeah, which is so important. Right.
And often children with lots of physical disabilities are too inactive, so that we don't think of putting them in a rocking horse. Well, you could if you adapt the rocking horse, or a rocking chair.
Have you made a rocking horse?
We have adapted a rocking horse, and rocking chairs, and so because to be a child means to move, And
Right.
just if we imagine not being able to, or being stuck in this chair for too long is
Right.
just unacceptable. So dynamic seating or promoting mobility is something that we really are encouraging. Later, this is actually a teenager who had a volunteer position at Boston's Museum of Science, and he loved turtles and iguanas and owls, and his job was to make salads. So this is
Salad?
to make salads for the rescued animals. And his job was to shred lettuce. So the adaptation there is a lettuce holder. And so this is kind of spanning the ages a little bit from the infants through the teenagers. This is going to be something that's increasingly an issue for senior citizens.
And how? I keep talking about that increasingly.
Yeah.
So do you have a website? You do.
We
you have
do.
a very good website.
Yep.
So people can go to it. What is it?
It's www.adaptivedesign.org.
And on it, they also can write to you, email
Sure,
you, and there's
sure.
the phone number and the address of your
Yes,
place.
on the website.
And so if somebody has somebody special that they need some equipment for, they can call you.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
also if a group wants you to come and conduct a workshop, do you go there or they come to you?
If there's some funding, we are certainly happiest to do things off-site or at their site, because that makes so much sense to teach people where they are with what materials they have.
And if they want to make a contribution, they'll get the
Please
address.
do.
And please,
Yes,
we certainly do. And we hope sometime that you get a really big corporate sponsor that will help you do this, because you are certainly doing some wonderful work. Thank you very much, Alex
Thank you
Truesdell.
so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
you.